want to thank everybody that comes. Everybody's got some gifts to give, and these people come and they sing and play. They get here early, and I appreciate it. If any of you guys ever want to do that, you can. You're welcome to be a part. Downstairs, some of you know it, some of you don't, but there are always gifted and called people that go downstairs and they keep kids and they teach those kids about the Bible and stuff, and that's a big deal. And Andrew is down there today, and so be sure to thank them. That is often a thankless job. My wife is down there sometimes, and Leah and other people, and I just want to appreciate and say thank you to everybody that volunteers, because that's hard stuff, but it's such good work, maybe the best work. And for the record, a lot of times it just looks like our children's program is an afterthought, but it's not. And it might be some of the most important work that we can do. And I've often said, I learned this from World Vision, but the CEO of World Vision once said that you can tell everything you want to know about an entire group of adults based on how they treat their kids. Whether it's a church, whether it's a city, whether it's a country, like if the kids are taken care of, there's a good chance that everything else in that society is actually healthy. It's a great litmus test for that. And I am thankful to have very, very capable people down there that are working with them often. And it just doesn't get noticed much because they're in the basement and stuff. So just be sure. I mean, it might mean a lot, even if you don't have kids or anything, just to say hello, just to speak. Hey, we've been talking about discipleship, and the reason why we're talking about discipleship is because discipleship is what it is all about. It's always been about discipleship. There's no differentiation in the New Testament about Christian and disciples. They were called Christians first in Antioch, all right? It just means Christ follower, but disciple means Christ follower. Disciple means learner or somebody that's a student, okay? And Jesus created this program. He started this program, and it's so strange. For 30 years, we don't hear much about him. All right, and then Jesus starts this program, and he starts this sort of unofficial track of being a rabbi, and he starts to go around and call these people called disciples, all right, and they just meant learner, and he says to them, follow me, and they drop their stuff, all right, and they follow after him, and then we hear this commission, this great commission, the end of Matthew, so he says, go out and make disciples. He's like, I'm leaving, I'm moving up, I'm going up, but the Holy Spirit's going to be with you. You make disciples. You go to the whole world, you make disciples. So we're supposed to be disciples. It's implied. We're to be disciples, and we're to make disciples. And that's really our focus, okay? It's our means and our end. It's what Jesus calls us to be and to do. And there's always that mixture of Christianity. You don't just do. You have to be. A lot of times people are like, what do you do? I'm like, well, I don't do anything. I be. What do you be? I try to be like Jesus. If you be like Jesus, you be close to Jesus, then you'll do everything you need to do. Right? Jesus often deflects everything. He's like, look, I don't do anything on my own. I just do what I see God doing. I don't say anything on my own. I just hear what the Father's doing. Whatever he's working, I just join in and do that. And he's like, can you just do the same thing? You just stay connected to me, and you won't have to worry about all that stuff. It'll just start to work itself out if you're his disciples. And if we give ourselves to the things he's called us to, if we put our leadership and our energy in the type of things that he asks us to. And so we have to look at discipleship, and we need to ask ourselves as a church, as a family, as a people, to meet what is success, all right, and whether or not we are being disciples, whether or not we're being disciples and whether or not we're making disciples. And we really should hang a lot of our success and a lot of our whatever we think that we're supposed to be doing off of that. And so we've covered a lot of ground. I want to reiterate, Jamie was here last week talking about some stuff that's not necessarily discipleship-based, but 2 weeks before that, we started messing with it, and I just want to go over that, what it is, very quickly so you'll know. All right, first of all, nothing was special about disciples. Are we clear on that? None of them were wealthy. None of them were well-connected. None of them were from the tribe of Aaron. None of them were Levitical priests. All right, none of them were teachers in the synagogue. None of them were special. None of them were buddies with Pharaoh or emperor or whatever. None of them were anything special, okay? 2 of them had a little bit of means because their dad had a fishing industry, a fishing boat, maybe. The most learned person was probably Judas from where he came from. So it was a cross-section of just regular, everyday people, okay? And it's on purpose because all through the Bible is never the special, super special called. It was just the people that God chose and God used, and they were everyday people. All right, and so there's the first thing that God wants us to see, because Jesus spends a lot of time with these disciples, and we think, well, they must be very special. They must have been like the coolest people, and God like ordained them before the foundation of the world to do everything, and the whole Christian religion is going to be, because of these guys. But they're not. They're just regular. I mean, they're already the losers. Because here's the other thing, we don't know a lot about first century discipleship ranks and how that all worked, but basically, Jewish people are tradition, okay? And they work on the Torah all the time, and all they do is think about the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, and they would memorize that and work as little kids, because you're supposed to bind it on your forehead. And they were just, and today you can go and find people and they got this stuff on their forehead. They're literally binding it to their forehead. And so from the day you were born into the Jewish world, all you did was worry about that Bible, okay? And if you could memorize the whole first 5 books, you could pass the test. And see, in that day, the preachers were like the top of the line, right? So you could work your way out if you were smart enough and did everything right and knew the right people, and you could be very successful as a rabbi. These guys are already lost, man. They already had to go into their daddy's trade, so they already lost. None of them were going to get to be disciples of any great rabbi. And that is why I think when Jesus comes along and he is sage-like as a rabbi, and he says, follow me, which is an invitation to be in his school of teaching, that they're like, okay, because there's a great honor and a great privilege, and they had already lost out on their chance. So these guys are misfits. They're not necessarily special at all, okay? And I think it's because God did not want us going around thinking that only special people could be disciples. It's not true. It's regular people. And I like regular. I like ordinary. I know that in today's world, we don't want to be regular. We want to be anything but regular, anything but ordinary. We want to differentiate ourselves in every way. But look, you got to wear the sandals you've been wearing. If you wear T-shirts, wear T-shirts. Listen, this other day, one of my nephews, I don't want to pick on him, but he'd never been on a date before. And I overheard him and one of the other teenagers talking about going on this date. And he had a picture or something. I was like, what do you got over there? It's a suit. And I'm like, you think you need a suit? And they're like thinking maybe he needed a suit. I'm like, you're 14, bro. You don't need a suit to go on a date. And I've never seen you wear a suit. Don't, and it's like the crazy thing where we're like, we're going to go on a date. So let's try to be everything we're not to really impress these people and make them all these things because we're so deficient or scared that they're not going to like us. And then what if you're successful in that? It wouldn't do anything. It would just kick the can down the road. I was like, just be who you are. The best thing you do is just be yourself and let that stuff happen. If she likes you, she likes you. But don't go around putting a suit. But that's what we do. We dress ourselves up. We dress other people up. We assume that everybody else is better. Everybody else is smarter. Everybody else got together. And we're just like every other Bible character. Can't be us that you're talking about, God. Can't be us that you're tapping. Not us. We're not special enough. We're nothing special. In fact, you can read in Acts, it says that after Christ had passed and he's risen to Father and the disciples are in all this stuff, and everybody's marveling at them. You go and read in Acts 4:13. It says, when they saw the courage of Peter and John, and they realized that these were unschooled, ordinary men, all right, they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. And there's your factor right there. They had been with Jesus. If you go and you look at the call of these disciples, they're doing what they're doing. Jesus says, follow me. All right, at one point, these guys are following Jesus early on, and Jesus is like, hey, what do y'all want? He says, well, where are you staying, Master? We'd love to see where you're staying. And Jesus is like, well, just come and see. And so the whole school of discipleship for Jesus is not like, hey, change your clothes, meet me at 5 a.m., and we're going to start running. You know what I mean? Like hardcore. He's like, no, just come on. And his whole school of training was that you would just come. And you would just be close. And by being close, like in being close proximity to him and hearing what he did and seeing what he did, that stuff would start to carry off on you because we're very impressionable. We're very impressionable. Let me go to England right now, and I'll have an English accent in like 2 days. Because we're so impressed. You know what I'm talking about? We're very impressionable, and we tend to emulate that which we're around. And so Jesus says, you just be with me. All you have to do is be with me. And you hear it in John 15. He says, look, I'm the vine, you're the branches. You just remain in me. Just stay with me. Stay close to me. Then everything will work out. Number 2, there are very few people, just a handful of people. Jesus gives all his time for 3 years to just a couple of people, a band of brothers, maybe 100, 150, 200 people total in all of his ministry, okay? He spends the majority of his time focused on this very small group of people, equipping them to deal with the multitudes. No formal school, no seminary, no outline course of study, no membership classes, no highly organized procedures. All he did was teach them to draw close to him and to gain life from being by him. And this is a very informal way of doing things. It was so different, a great contrast to the other rabbis of the day, because most religious leaders had formal procedures that you had to do if you were going to be a part of their group, okay? They insisted that these disciples do certain things or wear their clothes certain ways so that they would know that they're following this disciple. They would have very rigid programs because they wanted to be the best and they wanted to be the most righteous. And it was always like, well, I follow this rabbi and I follow this rabbi. And we still do that today. Well, I go to this place and I do this and I do this, and it's all about ego. All right, and Jesus does none of that. And a lot of times they say, well, why does John's disciples do this, but your disciples don't do this? And why does these disciples do? And Jesus is like, because we don't do that. And he just over and over again just sort of says, no. We're not doing it the way that you think. It's not the way of the world. It's not anything like what you think that you need to have to be successful. And so Jesus' followers were distinguished not outwardly conforming to certain rituals and rules, but by being with him and by learning from him. And that is what we are called to do, to be disciples, to simply be with Jesus and to know Jesus. And the more that we're with him and the more that we're knowing, regardless of our education, regardless of our gifts, people will be like, wait, you did that? Like, who are you? I remember listening to Francis Chan. You know, Francis Chan's written a best-selling book. He's world famous at this point. You know what all his family members said? They're like, you wrote a book and people read it? Like, you're doing this stuff? And he's like, yes, I'm doing this. Can you believe it? It's crazy. Because it's like saying it's not about me. It's not my power. And in fact, the more we're emptied of ourselves, it's like the more we can actually be powerful for God's sake. And so like less is more. And it's not upward mobility. It's downward mobility. It's you've heard it said, but I say unto you. And it's mostly always the opposite of what we think is necessary. Almost always the opposite of what the world would tell us. And so today, I want to look at just an idea, another brief idea that comes from looking at the school of discipleship that Jesus has, okay? This is an important aspect, and this is what we're called to do. Be disciples, make disciples means loving Jesus, following Jesus, going out, try to spread that love. And we can consider all of the ways that we can do that, because here's the thing. That's the same thing, but it can be manifest in, I think, billions of different ways. You will manifest the life of Jesus in your mortal flesh like you manifest the life of Jesus. I manifest the life of Jesus like I manifest the life of Jesus. And I manifest a weird word, but look, Jesus is going to come out of me, and it'll be the Spirit of Jesus. And it holds to the Spirit of Jesus, but it's still me. And to me, that's what he's wanting to do, is he comes in and the God life starts to be lived in us and through us. And we're not robots. We don't become the same. We don't get into all these regiments and we all look the same and walk like we're under some spell. No, it's just that we start to come out of our shell and become our true, authentic, and best self. And we quit being afraid of stuff. I was telling my friends last night, I heard this. I think it's so true. If you get close to God, you'll quit being afraid of stuff. You'll quit being afraid of stuff. And we wonder why we're not having power, but we're not plugged into Jesus. And we're afraid of everything. I don't know how I should do this. I don't know if we can speak the gospel to them. I don't know if we can just go pick up trash, because what do they think we're doing? And now it's getting funny to be Christians in our society. But if you get close to God, you quit being afraid of stuff, right? You get close to God, you quit worrying about success. You quit worrying about what other people think. You keep even worrying about what you say and how you say it, because there's something that supersedes all of it. So much of our undertaking, though, and is supposed to be about discipleship, but what does that look like, and how does that look? It has to look like you, and it has to be your life. Okay, Jesus goes wherever he's invited to go, and what he does is you ask him, he comes and he invites him into your life, into your context, and that life, in that context, starts to be transformed, okay? And then when your life and your context and everything starts to be transformed, then you start transforming around you. You become a transforming agent. Okay, and that is what I'm saying. Be a disciple and you make disciples. And there's not a lot of pressure. There's not a lot of pressure. He doesn't say, do this, do that. There's some stuff, there's some directives. But follow Jesus and be close to him. And nobody has to really teach you how to do that. You can begin to pray right now. Kids know how to pray, all right? You can begin to, it's all the things that we've always thought it was. But here's where I'm at today. what does successful discipleship look like? And this is a big thing, because what is success? We need to ask it, because to me, if I look around, everywhere, everything I see is success. It's about success, isn't it? It's like we don't even care what happens as long as we're successful. Like, I don't care if we win, we cheated. You know, like everybody liked the Houston Astros till they realized that they were putting cameras in the back and cheating the whole year. Everybody likes, the guy that wins the Tour de France 9 times and they realize he's been juicing the whole time. Like, it's all good and successful as long as it looks successful and has the appearance of success. We also don't even care what version, if it's really successful or not, as long as we just don't want to be losers. We just want to win. And the disciples were no different than that. Look, the disciples in Jesus' day are no different than that. They want Jesus to win. They're like, Jesus, all these crowd loves you. Be king. Jesus withdraws from them. They're like, hey, Jesus, we found some people that were opposed to us. Do you want us to call fire down from heaven and kill them? Jesus is like, shut up. They're like, hey, just overthrow the Roman government. You know they're oppressing us. Like, come on, like, win, dude. And he doesn't win, all right? And when he's popular, they love him. The popular, they're like, get these kids away from him. He's too important. And then when all they're out to arrest him, these disciples are running naked through the woods, cursing and swearing when people ask them, do they know? I don't even know him. Have nothing to do with them, because their idea of success is what was driving them, all right? And when Jesus all of a sudden didn't look successful, and he did not look successful, still to this day, I guess now he kind of looks successful because he's the most important person in all human history. And more art has been inspired by him than any other person in human history. And so on and so forth. So now he looks successful, but in that day after he died, it just went back to normal and nobody thought anything about it, because he got killed naked. He got killed in this infamous way, in this public display that just showed him and all his followers were nowhere around. All right? So they didn't like how it went for Jesus. All right? He did not seem successful, okay? And those disciples are just like us, all right? They curse and swear and run up and down and deny him. And then when they need him, they're right back where they were. And they're just like me and you. Look, they don't want to go home and hear from their wife and kids. Man, like, dang, dude, you followed Jesus for 3 years. You got nothing to show for it. Like, consider the lilies, man. We're eating lilies. Like, what have you been doing for 3 years? I can just imagine them coming home and their wives just beating up on them, or their kids saying, like, what, you just left us all for that? Don't take any stock advice from this guy. Like, he doesn't know what he's doing. Like, that's what they're probably thinking and how it reflects on them. So I just want to make the point that so much of our life is about success, and we want to show ourselves successful in whatever we do. And it seems like pretty much the goal, be successful, all right? But is it always true? Like, take a manufacturing company. Maybe they put out a great product. Maybe they give their shareholders lots of funds. But what if they're ruining like hundreds of acres and killing fish? Or what if they're dumping out so much air pollution that's like killing people and putting carcinogens into the air and it's causing cancer in their whole town? Well, man, I can't be mad at them. They're successful, right? Or you meet these people, they've been married. Like, you imagine 40 years they're married. And they smile and then Olin Mills pictures, but they're rotten and they don't even talk to each other. Like, you don't know. It's just about the appearance. And I just feel like a lot of times we almost would just rather have the appearance because it saves face, because it's about ego these days. And so for us, what does it mean to be successful as disciples, and what ought that to look like? Look, I know that we want to see growth. I know that we want to see success. I know we want to see all those things. Maybe those things come. Maybe those things don't come. But if we make whether we're going to follow, whether or not we're going to do the right thing based on the outcomes, we can't guarantee the outcomes. Jesus' outcome from a face value standpoint was God didn't come through. He died. That's the outcome. But yet he's triumphing over his enemies. And in the larger scheme of things, he was doing the very thing he was supposed to do. And so success labels are dangerous. Where is God working today? Where's God working? He must be working at big ministries where there's got traffic lined up and they got to have police officers to stop the traffic. He must be working there. I'm not here to pick on him, okay? But is he not working among us just because there's few of us? That's worldly stuff. That's worldly stuff. And I want to be the first to admit that I have worried too much about that. I have worried too much about that. I have sat on the stage discouraged and sad and mad that people didn't come or that people didn't like me. Take every little thing personally. Wonder if I said the wrong thing or did the wrong thing or didn't call somebody back or just second guess. You could second guess yourself to death worrying about what everybody thinks and worrying about whether or not you're being successful. And you don't even know what success really is. And I don't even know what it is because all it really is about appearance and making everybody else happy. But none of that stuff is the way that God works. He always says, I don't look at the outward appearance. I look at the heart. He says that in 1 Samuel. I mean, like we say, whatever we do, be successful. As long as successful, whatever you do, be successful. But that's not what the Bible says. It says whatever you do, whether word and deed, do it all for the glory of God, as if working for God and not for men. So he's basically saying, whatever you do, you'll be successful if you do it for the right motives, if you do it for the right reasons, with the heart of God in mind, for his kingdom's sake in mind. And God will do that. If you stay close to him, he's going to do all the rest of it. Right? But what he's not going to do, I don't think, is take our faulty means and our funny stuff, and he's going to bless it. Why? Because he doesn't have to. He doesn't bless that. He could take everything bad that happened to us, and he can transform it into good. But don't think he needs to take all your bad and all your extra stuff, and that he needs all that stuff, and that you need to cut corners for the kingdom, because it doesn't work that way. He doesn't have to work that way. All right? He works in total integrity. Now, here's who I want to talk about with the small amount of time that we have left. Job. You know that Job is the oldest book in the Bible. And it could be hypothetically thought that Job was a first disciple or type of disciple. Job follows God. You know the story, right? It's the oldest book, okay? It's like a myth, all right? Job follows God. He does everything right. Man, he's blessed everywhere he goes. Listen, Job's so good that he even made sacrifices for his kids just in case they did something wrong so that they would also be covered. Like, you couldn't find anything wrong with him. Successful on all fronts. But then we get this other story, the story that me and you don't have necessarily about our lives, or we can if we want to consider the scriptures, but there's God and Satan, and they're talking about who's faithful in the world and who's not. And what does he say? Well, you consider my servant Job. He hasn't done anything wrong, doesn't ever do anything wrong. And Satan says, well, that's because you got him everything. So let's take it all away, and I'll bet you. So they make this weird wager. And look, I don't want to sit and think about God and if that's wrong of him or whatever. You got problems with that? I don't know, okay? It's a myth. You got to look at the story for what it is. But that story was happening on the first level in the cosmic universal scale, and Job knew nothing about it. So we know what happens. He loses all of it. He suffers unimaginably, okay? Suffers worse than any of us could suffer. All your kids dead. All your businesses dead. All your health down the drain. All your wealth gone. All in one day, all right? And the whole book is about his friends coming to him and them all talking about how Job really has screwed up and what has caused him to lose all of his success, all right? And Job hears it, man, day in and day out. And he judges himself so hard. He's like, no, I'm no good. But he doesn't curse God. He doesn't come up with all these negative ideas, okay? And everything wants to make him crack. It's all about making him crack under that pressure, but he doesn't do it. And we know the whole story. In the end, he's vindicated. In the end, he's made successful. And in the end, he's blessed even more than he was to begin with. And so it's a good story. It all looks successful. But my question is, as a disciple of Jesus, at what point was Job not doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing? Where was Job not doing exactly what God wanted him to do? There's not a point where he wasn't. But everything would appear that way. I mean, anything would appear that way. Man, you done something wrong, bruh. I mean, any one of these things points to you're in a mess, like you're bad, like you're no good. Like those guys were being nice to him because they pitied him. But this is the real winner. And he was doing what he was supposed to do. So what is the great thing that we ought to be after as disciples? To me, looking at Job, and is that you have to be faithful. We have to be faithful. Faith is not getting what you want. It's accepting what God gives. Faith is not believing in me and all my power and all my ability to get out of it. It's to trust God, right? Faith is not me thinking good thoughts and having good logical arguments and hedging all my bets and just living the cleanest way I can. No, it's trusting all to God. All right? And giving him all those opportunities and letting him do whatever he wants to with the consequences of what that means. And Job says, look, Job's got great faith quotes. He says, even if God kills me, I'm still going to trust in him. He says that. He says, even if he says, in another place he goes, he knows the way that I take. He knows me. He knows the way that I am. He knows the way that I take. And after he has tested me, I'm going to come forth as gold. So Job still believed in God. He still believed in the goodness of God and the heart of God. And he scoured the whole idea of what could happen. He listened to all his friends talk for days and days and days about how he could have had misstepped. And he was totally willing to believe himself to have done that. But he was never doing that. He was never wrong. He was never wrong because we know the larger story. And so isn't it true with us that regardless of what your life looks like today or my life, or regardless of the way that this ministry works or that ministry works, or regardless of the way that you can have a terrible day, but you can say the one right thing to the one right person that God wanted you to say the right thing to, and it could be fully successful in the eyes of heaven. You wouldn't know it. So we're not going to really get it all added up until the end. We're walking by faith and not by sight. We're looking to an inheritance that doesn't spoil or fade away. We're looking to the new Jerusalem. We're looking to the day when the lion and the lamb will lay together, when God says all things will be reconciled. It says everybody will appear before the judgment and seat of Christ to receive what they've done in the body, whether good or bad. So there will be a day, and it's called the day. Right? And so we're supposed to live as eschatological. When you start thinking about the end times or the future times and thinking with that in mind, it's a very important part of the Christian heritage, which is that this isn't our home and that we're not living for small dividends. We're living for long-term investments in the future, and we're trusting that God knows what we need, and God knows what's best, and that God even knows what the world needs, and that God's even going to use us small, uneducated people to carry out his stuff. Because here's the thing he says. He said, look, I'm just going to make sure you know, I'm going to use the foolishness of the world to confound the wise. Because my foolishness is more wise than all your wisdom. And so he takes us, he uses us. Faith keeps going encouraged or discouraged. Faith says he kills me, I'm going to trust him, right? Faith says, I'm going to keep going. Faith says, look, what do I have in my hands? I've got this stuff. Well, I'm going to use this stuff. I'm going to use this stuff. Right? You don't say, well, man, I got a gift, but that guy's got a better gift, so he must be the one. I don't need to use my stuff. Right? Oh, these people are doing a lot of good over there. I guess I don't need to do that. That's a competition. And it's more of ego. And it's more of us trying to be successful. Again, I just think that the pressure is off. All right? The pressure is off when we realize that we don't have to be successful and we just have to be faithful. All right, the pressure is off because it's just about you and the Lord. Okay, one more thing, and we'll be done here today. But I lost my place, so I guess it might not matter. Our calling is not to success. Our calling is to faithfulness. All right, the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows. To me, what you should do, or know what you should do, what I've been doing, is I keep looking at what God called me to do and the things that I know that God told me to do, the ways that he's been faithful to me, all right, the places that I keep seeing life over and over again. And when I close my eyes, I see my post. You know, like you have your old post, you know, it's kind of like your home base, like your post, like you're supposed to be there. You know, like Dances with Wolves. He had to go out there. He was at his post. He hung out with his post, and then he eventually abandoned his post. Okay. Bad analogy. But he has his post, and he feels like he's responsible. He's authorized to be at that post, so he stays at that post. And you see him at the beginning of it. He's making it all right. He's getting it all right because for the United States Army, he's going to hold his post, right? And that's like, to me, what God says. He's like, I've got you posted here. That's your post. I need you to post up. Hang out. Post up. You're supposed to be there. You have gifts and ideas and things for your people, for your post. All right, we don't need you over here at this post. You got to be at your post. And if you abandon your post, who's going to take your post on? Right? If you say, I don't like my post, I want somebody else's post. Well, you're back to losing. Because it's not success. Success is not wanting someone else's life. Success is living your life well. And to me, our life well, living our life well, is not about worldly success, friends. We cannot judge it based on that. We have to judge it by what our integrity says, what our conscience says, what the Word of God says. And we have to say, man, to what degree am I living up to this? To what degree do I even want to? And you know what? That's okay, because there's unbelief in us. There's sin in us. There's selfishness in all of us, even the very best of us. Even the most Christian person you know is not Jesus, okay? They're still struggling with all this stuff. And so it can take the pressure off for you to ask God, where's my post? What do you want me to do? All right? You stay with your post. He might call you to another post. You'll know. You'll know. But until then, be faithful. How many times did Jesus liken his life to, he talks about these parables where there's servant or a master, and he goes off and he leaves servants in charge. And then he comes back. It's like a bunch of them. It's like a type of parable almost. You know, see what the servants have done. Sometimes they got drunk and became idiots, and they're beating the other servants, and they're just throwing it all away. That is not the good servants, okay? They abandon their post. And it says sometimes they see guys are doing the right thing. Women are doing the right thing. They're at their post. Even though nobody's watching, they're being faithful, being faithful to God. And God is so pleased, I think, with our simple willingness to be faithful. I'll give you one more example, and I'll be quiet for today. You know, it's not about success, about faithfulness. I have told you this story, but I remember being one time in a situation in my life where I was very regimented, very rule-oriented. I felt very good about my life and my discipleship because I kept all these rules. But then we went out of town, and I usually woke up at 5 a.m., and I usually had my coffee and my pencil and my journal and all my devotional books, and I had a way of reading them and doing all. And if you missed that, you know, I was just in trouble. I just didn't feel good. And so I brought all my gear, and I was in the hotel room with 3 other guys, and they had to keep sleeping at 5, and I just felt like I was legalistic. I felt like 5 was when it had to happen. So I remember getting up and getting my gear on and walking around this little beat-up hotel looking for somewhere where I could have my quiet time, okay? And guess what? I could find no place. No place. There's just too much going on everywhere. Finally, I find this stairwell with this neon light outside. It's like 99.9 degrees in this stairwell, all right? And I'm like, man, well, this is the only place. And I sit down and I begin to pray, and the Spirit of the Lord covers me. Like I'm talking about covers. Like I've never forgotten it. It's one of the most vivid times where I felt like he just wrapped me up like a coat. And I never even opened the Bible. And to me, what that has always said is, just glad you wanted to. It's the heart. Like you're just faithful. It's not like I'm thinking it has to be successful. I have to learn something. I have to cover my reading plan. I've got to write some stuff down in the journal. And God is just like the Spirit of God. It's just the allegiance, just the faithfulness. And so how much of our Christian life is really internally, really about the heart, really if nobody else sees anything different, just to keep faithful, to keep Jesus at the center of our hearts and just to keep following him day in, day out. To me, if we can do that, we're being disciples. And we're being good disciples because we're staying faithful. Let Jesus deal with the success. Let him. Look, Paul even says, you know, we water, we plant, but God makes it grow. All of the success, all of the stuff, it'll come. It'll come, or maybe even it won't. But we will find at the center of our hearts, we'll find God saying yes. God affirming us because we were faithful to the things that he called us to. And to me, friends, that is the core of discipleship. Look, again, all those guys weren't smart. They had not done a bunch of stuff. Even when he was with them, he just made Jesus mad most of the time. But all of them eventually got it. And all of them were faithful to the very end. You know, every one of those 11, you know, Judas wasn't. But all the rest of them died terrible deaths. They were all killed for what they, like, later on, killed in different ways. One of them said, I'm not even going to be crucified like Jesus. I'm not worthy of it. So they wanted him to crucify me upside down. So they crucified him upside down. They were all faithful. And to me, that's what Jesus is looking for. Can I depend on you? Will you be faithful to me? Will you be faithful to the gospel? Regardless, even if the whole world turns on us. Because I got a feeling it is. I got a feeling it is. But will we fold and melt like plastic when the heat turns up? Or will we dig in and we'll say, no, man, we're going to keep going. This is what God wants us to do. Hey, remember, if you stick close to Jesus, you won't be afraid. You stay close to Jesus, you'll quit being afraid of stuff, right? And so let's keep spurring one another on into being followers of Jesus. This assembling is about encouraging you and encouraging me, encourage your neighbor to keep going because we need that encouragement. It's a discouraging thing, okay? And I think that's what Satan's wanting to do. He's just wanting to just wear us out till we give up. I think that's what his interest is. That's what I have to say. Just today we got we got 5 minutes, and I'll just say a prayer, and we can be finished today. So pray with me, just in your own way, wherever you are, and let's just ask God to recenter us and to reorient us about what success really looks like. God, I thank you so much for this day, Lord, and I thank you for each person. Lord, I thank you for your word that never leads us astray if we'll rightly divide it, if we'll look at it with friends and consider what it says, if we'll keep it in the forefront of our minds, if we keep following after you first and foremost. I pray that just for our hearts, Father, for allegiance, that we would, that you would ignite passion in us to be Jesus freaks, to be about our Father's business, to take courage from people like Job, who were shown no signs of anything, and yet they held the faith, they kept it up. Or to read about the people in Hebrews 11 that time after time after time, they were rejected, they were hurt, they were killed and tortured, and they didn't even receive the promise, and yet they held fast. And we have this great cloud of witnesses that are watching and cheering us on because this is our time. And it's our chance to be faithful to you and to your call and to your gospel in the world, and never as the world needed it more. And so I just pray that you would instill a radical boldness into each person, a newfound love and commitment to you and to your cause, and that we would just be faithful to use the gifts and be good stewards of what we've been given, Lord. We would be kingdom-minded. And I pray, God, that we know that if we'll just do those things, you'll use us. You'll use us, and we'll be storing up our treasures in heaven. God, I thank you for this ministry. I thank you for each person here. I thank you for their families, for their businesses, for their lives. I thank you for each of their health, Lord, and for every issue and for everything that's holding them back right now, Father. I just ask that you would open their eyes to see what it is and how small it is and how little concerned you are with that stuff, Father, because you love us and we're your children. And nothing we could do is going to change that. Help us to be your faithful people. That's our prayer in Christ's name. Amen.